Hello and welcome to my latest video. So we've done the cat photo app, we've done the build a cafe menu. Now we're going to learn CSS colours by building a set of coloured markers. So step one. So we're going to build that. So as you've seen in the previous projects, web pages should start with a doc HTML declaration followed by an HTML element. Add a doc type HTML, and by this time you should be used to doc type HTML all in capitals, except for the HTML, closing HTML. HTML. After that, give the HTML element a language attribute with an EN as its value. So space language equals EN for English. Nest a head element within the HTML element, so just a head element, /head, just a head element. Just after the head element, add a body element. So after the head element, I'm going to add a body element. So greater than, less than, and body in between it. Remember that the title element gives search engines extra information about the page. It also displays the content of that title element in two more ways: in the title bar when the page is open, so up there, in the browser tab for the page when you hover on it. Even if the tab is not active, once you hover on the tab, the title text is displayed. Within the head element, nest a title element with the text coloured markers. So we need a title tag, or a title element, however you want to call it, and put in COLORD markers, coloured markers, right? Right, so that's not it. So, sorry, your code does not pass, keep trying. Remember, casing and spelling matter for the title. Oh, right, okay. Silly me. One wee mistake, and that's you, Snicket. The char set attribute specifies the character encoding used by document UTF-8 Unicode transformation format 8-bit is a character encoding standard used for electronic communication. Inside the head element, nest a meta element with the attribute char set to UTF-8. So below the title, we need a meta tag char set equals inverted comma UTF-8, and then a greater than sign. Okay, that's that done. Just wait. You can have multiple meta elements on a web page. Each meta element adds information about the page that cannot be expressed by other HTML elements. Add another meta element with the head, give it the name attribute, set to viewport, and a content attribute set to width device, width, comma, initial scale equals 1.0. So your page looks the same on all devices. So meta name equals viewport. Let me get this right actually. Width device, width, no, it's content. minus width equals device minus width. No, still something wrong. So meta name equals viewport, right? And content width equals device minus width, comma, initial scale. No. There were 3 errors actually. Oh well, we'll go there and end up. So it's meta name equals viewport, content equals width equals device minus width, comma, space, initial, NIITIAL minus scale equals 1.0. Now you're ready to start adding content to the page with the body element nest an H1 element. So in the body element, we'll nest an H1 element. So 2 tabs over, H1, and we'll put in CSS, capital C, OLOR, let's see if we'll get it right, markers with a capital K. Oh, and you see the screen change to CSS color markers. Right, so in this project you'll work with an external CSS file to style the page. We've already created a style CSS, so style CSS is there, so it's just a blank page. So in this project you'll work with an external CSS file to style the page. We've already created a styles.css file for you. Before you can use it, you'll need to link it to the page. Nest a link element with the head within the head element. Give it a rel attribute and set it to style sheet and an href, so a hyperreference attribute style to CSS, which is that. So whatever your file's called, that'll be the reference, the hyperreference. So in this case we nest a link element within the head element and give it a, right, so I think we'll put it below title, or no, put it below the content actually. So link relationship or rel style sheet, and the hyperreference or href is styles.css, which your file's called. So whatever your file's called, I don't know, whatever you've saved your CSS is later on, it's just a hyperreference and that's the link. And that's the style sheet for what it is, what format it's in. Right, so create a new CSS rule that targets the H1 element and set its text align property to the centre. Right, so that's the HTML here, doc, HTML, head, meta. Now we're going to do the CSS over here, but it'll go into this file, styles.css. So, create a CSS rule that targets H1. So H1, that's the target, parentheses or brackets, and set text align, colon, it's no equals, centre, semicolon, and then you'll look and you'll see it's centered now. Now you'll add some elements that you'll eventually style in the color markers. Firstly, within the body element, add a div element and set its class attribute to container. Make sure that the div element is below the H1 element. So below the H1 element, we've got a div element, we've got a closing div, or a closing div tag, sorry, or a div element, whatever you want to call it. So first, within the body element, add a div element and set its class attribute to container. So in the first div we put class equals container, and mind it's a space first, space, class equals container. Make sure the div element is below the H1. Next, within the div element, add another div element and give it the class of marker. So within the div element, so that's within it, and that's the closing div. So within it, we need a div and a closing div, and again, space out, space, class equals marker. Right, so it's time to add some colour to the marker. In fact, I'm going to Right, it's time to add some colour to the marker. Remember that one way to add colour to an element, I've just put it into style CSS instead of HTML. Right, so it's time to add some colour to the marker. Remember, one way to add colour to an element is to use a colour code like black, cyan or yellow. As a reminder, here's how to target the class free code camp. So it's a dot for a class, whatever we've made class, which in HTML it's class container, class marker. So in this case we go to style CSS again, and we create a new CSS rule that targets the class marker and sets its background colour to red. So dot for a period, or a dot for the class. So we're targeting marker, parentheses, background colour. So we're only going to colour the marker, colon, red, semicolon. And you'll see it has done that. So what have I now done? BACKGROUND, colour, background colour red. You will not see any changes after adding the CSS. So how are we now moving on then? Got to reset that. Right, so create a new CSS rule that targets the class marker and set its background colour property to red. Right, so dot marker, parentheses, background minus colour, colon, red, semicolon. I don't know what I done the first time then. The background colour was applied, but since the marker div element has no content in it, it doesn't have any height by default. In your dot marker CSS rule, set the height to 25 pixels and the width to 200 pixels. So height 25 pixels, pix, semicolon, and the width, colon, to 200 pixels, semicolon, and then you'll see a red marker. Right, your marker would look better if it was centred on the page. An easy way to do that is with margin shorthand property. In the last project you set the margin element of the elements separately with properties margin top, margin left, margin right, etc. Shorthand property makes it easy to set multiple margin areas at the same time. To centre your marker on the page, set its marker property to auto. This sets margin top, margin right, margin bottom and margin left to all to auto. So margin colon auto semicolon, and you'll see it's centred. Right, now that you've got one marker centred with the colour, it's time to add other markers. In the container div, add two more div elements and give each of the class a marker. Right, in the container div, in the container div element, add two more div elements. Right, so underneath, I would say, so div, another div, a div, another div. Add two more div elements and give them the class of marker. So again, space, class equals marker. Again, space, class equals marker. And you'll see it's all red background because it's a marker, it's doing them all. If we class that as marker, it'll mark them all. So while you have three separate marker div elements, they look like one big triangle. You should add some space between them to make it easier to see each element. When the shorthand margin property has two values, it sets margin top and margin bottom to the first value and margin left and margin right to the second value. In your dot marker CSS rule, set the margin property to 10 pixels in auto. Right, so 10 pixels space auto, and you'll see they're separated now. 1, 2, 3. To give the markers different colours, you'll need to add a unique class to each one. Multiple classes can be added to an element by listing them in the class attribute and separating them with a space. For example, the following adds both animal and dog classes to a div element. So div equals div class equals animal space dog, but within the two inverted commas is two names. So if you add multiple classes, so you add multiple, so animal and dog or cat and parrot, whatever you want to, as long as it's between the two inverted commas and it's got a class. And if you add multiple classes to an HTML element, the styles of the first classes your list may be overridden by the later classes. To begin, add the class 1 to the first marker div element. So here we go. So 1. So next, remove the background colour property and its value from marker CSS. Right, so we're going to take the background colour property. Okay. Then create a new CSS rule that targets the class 1 and set its background colour to red. So dot 1 parentheses or background or brackets background colour colon red, and you'll see it's went red again. So add the class 2 to the second marker div and add class 3 to the third marker. So marker, as long as it's in between the inverted commas, then we're fine. So 2, 3. So create a CSS rule that targets the class 2 and sets its background colour property to green. Right, so create a CSS rule that targets class 2. So dot, a period or a dot, brackets or parentheses, background colour colon green, semicolon. Also create a separate CSS rule that targets the class 3 and set its background to blue. Right, so again, so 3 parentheses or brackets, background colour, make sure you spell it right, don't do add-in, background colour colon blue, BLUE semicolon. I was going to say, why is that not working? No wonder. Didn't see that there. There are two main colour models: the additive RGB red, green and blue, like a scat lead red, green and blue model used in electronic devices, and the subtractive CMYK cyan, magenta, yellow and black, like a printer's model used in print. There you go. In this project you'll work with RGB model. This means that the colours begin as black and change as different levels of red, green and blue are introduced. An easy way to see this is with CSS RGB function. Create a new CSS rule that targets the class container and set its background colour to black with RGB 0, 0, 0. So in other words, it's RGB, so red will be 0, green will be 0 and blue will be 0. So 0, 0, 0, so it'll be black. So create a CSS rule for container. So dot container for the CSS. So a period or a dot to make it a class and set its background colour colon to RGB bracket, remind the brackets 0, 0, space 0, space 0, and you don't need a last comma, and then a semicolon at the end, and then you'll see it's all black now at the back. Right, a function is a piece of code that can take an input and perform a specific action. So read that again. A function is a piece of code that can take an input and perform a specific action. The CSS RGB function accepts values or arguments for red, green and blue and produces a colour, which is RGB. So red, comma, space, green, comma, space, blue, bracket, semicolon, bracket. Each red, green and blue value is a number from 0 to 255. 0 means that there's 0 of that colour and is black, and 255 means there is 100% of that colour. In the one CSS rule, replace the colour code red with the RGB function. For the RGB function, set the value for red to 255, the value for green 0 and the value for blue 0. So we'll take red out. Okay, so background colour colon RGB, mind the brackets, and in the one CSS rule, replace the colour code red. So red's the first one, so 255, comma, space 0, comma, space 0, semicolon, and then it will come red again. Right. Notice that the background colour for your marker is still red. This is because you set the value of RGB function to the maximum of 255 or 100% red and set both the green and blue values to 0. Now use the RGB function to set the other colours in the dot 2 or period 2 CSS rule. Use the RGB function to set the background colour to the maximum value for green and 0 for the other values, and in 3 CSS rule use the RGB function to set the background colour to the maximum of blue and 0 for the value. Right, so again, RGB, so colon RGB bracket, so this time it's no red, it's blue. No, it's, sorry, wait a minute. Right, that's not going to work. It's RGB. Oh, RGB. So it's red, green and blue. So background colour, right, so this is because you set, right, so in the 2 rule, use the RGB function to set the background colour to the maximum value of green. So this time it's 0, comma, space 255 for the green, comma, 0, semicolon. Right, and add the background colour to the maximum value of blue. Right, so we're going to do blue this time. So again, it's colon RGB, don't forget your RGB and don't forget your brackets. And it's background colour to the maximum value of blue. So this time it's 0, comma, 0, comma. So red and green's 0 and blue's 255, which is 100% blue. Way! I'll tell you, the first time I tried to do that, oh man, I can imagine when somebody tries to sit down and do this for the first time. While the red and blue markers look the same, the green one is much lighter than it was before. This is because the green colour keyword is actually a darker shade and is about halfway between black and the maximum value of green, for green. And the 2 CSS rules set the green value in the RGB function to 127 to lower the intensity. So we're going to take that out and put 127, and you'll see the green is lower in intensity. It's like a dark green now. Now add a little more vertical space between your markers and the edge of the container element they're in. In the container CSS rule, use the shorthand padding property to add 10 pixels to the top and bottom padding and set the left and right to 0. This works similarly to the shorthand margin property you used earlier. So underneath background colour, we need padding. Oh, spell padding right. Colon. So padding colon to add, so wait a minute. So property add 10 pixels to the top and bottom. So 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 0. Oh, pixel, 0, pixel. Oh no. No. So it's 10 pixels for top and bottom, and left and right is just 0. Oh. Still no. Your container CSS should have a padding property set to 10 pixels and 0. Oh, maybe no need the comma. That's what it is, the comma. You don't need the comma. See, sometimes you need the comma and sometimes you don't. In the additive RGB colour model, primary colours are colours that when combined create pure white, but for this to happen, each colour needs to be at its highest intensity. Before you combine colours, set your green marker back to the pure green. For the RGB fill colour and CSS rule, set green back to the maximum value of 255. So take 127 out and put 255 in. My battery's running down. Wow. What a nonsense. Still got 20%. Now that you have the primary RGB colours, it's time to combine them. For the RGB function in the container rule, set the red, green and blue values to the maximum 255. In fact, I'll take you back. I'll put the charger on. It's a wee bit brighter, so it's charging. Right. So we're charging. So now that you have the primary RGB colours, it's time to combine them. For the RGB function in the container rule, set the red, green and blue values to the maximum of 255. So for the RGB function in the container rule, set the red, green and blue to 255. So 255 red, 255 and 255. Right. So secondary colours are the colours you get when you combine primary colours. You might have noticed in some colours in the last step as you change the red, green and blue values. To create the first secondary colour, yellow, update the RGB function in the one CSS rule to combine pure red and pure green. So pure red and pure green. So to create the next secondary colour, cyan, update the RGB function in the period 2 or class 2 CSS rule to combine pure green and pure blue. So pure green is the second one and pure blue is the last one. So 255 and we've got cyan. So to create a final secondary colour, magenta, update the RGB function in .3 or class 3 or period 3 CSS rule to combine pure blue and pure red. So pure blue is 255 and pure red is the first one, 255. So 255 red, so they're magenta. Now that you're familiar with secondary colours, you learn how to create Terraria colours. I think that's what it says. Terraria colours are created by combining a primary with a nearby secondary colour. To create Terraria colour orange, update the RGB function in the one CSS rule so that red is at the maximum value and set green to 127. Right, so let's create that. To create the Terraria colour orange, update the RGB function in the class 1 period 1 or CSS rule 1 so that the red is at the maximum value and set green to 127. So we'll do green 127 and then put right, red to the maximum value and green to 127. Oh wait a minute, and so it's 255 for red to the maximum and green to 127. So it's red, green and blue. So they're orange. Notice that to create orange you had to increase the intensity of red and decrease the intensity of green RGB, red, green and blue values. This is because orange is a combination of red and yellow. To create a Terraria, that's easy to say. Terraria colour spring green, combine cyan with green, update the RGB function in the period 2 class 2 CSS rule so that the green is at the maximum value and set blue to 127. So green at the maximum value and set blue to 127. 127. Right. So, and to create the Tataria colour violet, combine magenta with blue, update the RGB function in 3 CSS rule so that blue is at the maximum value and set red to 127. So red is the first one, red, green and blue. Right. So there are two main Tartaria colours, char, russet green and yellow, azure, blue and cyan, and rose, red and magenta. Easy for me fucking say, Jesus Christ. Not. To create char, russet green, update the RGB function in the 1 CSS rule so that the red is at 127 and set green maximum value. For azure, update the RGB function in 2 CSS rule so that the green is at 127 and blue is at the maximum value. As for rose, which is sometimes called bright pink, update the RGB function in 3 CSS rule so that blue is at 127 and red is at the maximum value. Right, start that again. So the first one, we need to update the RGB class 1 rule so that the red is at 127. So class 1 rule, the red's at 127 and set green to the maximum value, which is 255. Oh no, 1000, 255 and no a T. Right, and set the green, right, and then azure is 2, target 2 to 1, so that green is 127. So green is the second one, 127, and blue is at the maximum value, which is 255. And then the CSS rule so that blue is 127. So blue is the last one, so 127, and the red is at the maximum value, which is the first one, which is 255. Hey, moving on. Now that you've gone through all the primary, secondary and tertiary colours on a colour wheel, it'll be easier to understand other colour theory concepts and how they impact design. Are you sure? First, in the CSS rule, .1, .2, .3, adjust the values in the RGB function so that the background colour of each element is set to pure black. Remember that the RGB function uses additive colour model where colours start as black and changes the values of red, green and blue increase. Adjust the values in the RGB so that the background colour of each element is pure black. Right, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Right, moving on. A colour wheel is a circle where similar colours of hues are more near each other and different ones are further apart. For example, pure red is between the hues rose and orange. Two colours that are opposite from each other on the colour wheel are called complementary colours. If two complementary colours are combined, they produce grey, but when they are placed side by side, these colours produce strong visual contrast and appear brighter. In the RGB function for the 1 CSS rule, set the red value to the maximum of 255 to produce pure red. So 255, because red's the first one, to produce, and then 255, red, green, 255 in the green, and the blue. Oh no, wait a minute, that's not right. That is it. 255 in the blue. Oh. 25 blue's the last one. No, wait a minute. Right, so the RGB function for 1 CSS rule, set the rule value to the maximum 255 to produce red. So red, green, blue, 255 red. And set the value for the green and blue to the maximum. Oh, green and blue. 255 and 255. And what's the other one? No. That's it. Right, so notice that the red and cyan colours are very bright right next to each other. This contrast can be distracting if it's overused on a website and can make the text hard to read if it's placed on a contemporary coloured background. It's better practice to choose one colour as a dominant colour and use the contemporary colours as an accent to bring attention to certain content on the page. First, in the H1 rule, use the RGB function to set its background colour to cyan. So, background colour colon, and you don't need to do RGB this time, just type cyan. No, you do need to do RGB. Oh, it doesn't tell you that. Oh, it does. I didn't see that bit. RGB, major brackets, 0, 255, oh no, space 255, 255, comma, space 255, mind your semicolon. Right, next in the 1 CSS rule, use the RGB function to set the background colour to black, and 2 CSS, use the RGB colour, set the background colour to red. Right, so next in the 1 CSS, use the RGB colour to set the background colour to black. So black, I'll just get rid of the bracket, I know. So, and background colour to red. So 255, 0, 0. No? Aye. Notice that how your eyes are naturally drawn to the red colour in the centre when designing a site. You can use this effect to draw attention to important headings, buttons or links. There are several other important colour combinations outside the contemporary colours, but you'll learn those a bit later. For now, use the RGB function in period 2 or class 2 CSS rule to set the background colour to black. So again, just 255 and change it to 0, 0, 0, 0, and they'll all be black. And in the H1 CSS rule, remove the background colour property and the value to go back to the default white colour. So just highlight, backspace, and then check your control, and then you're away. Okay, thanks very much for watching my latest video. I'll update on the next one. Thank you, bye now. Any comments, leave below.